and he can actually have.
You pay the fine, and the fine is belief in Jesus Christ.
And the fine was moved to Jesus Christ by faith.
Contradiction is okay with my worldview.
Beliefs, but
And just to get started, you can just go first name. I'm Dave.
I'm Nelson.
I'm Coral.
These guys are here from New England, and we've already kind of got acquainted just a little bit. And we kind of ran over kind of where we're going. I guess the first easy question is, why are you guys here?
Well, we wanted to come by and at least show some support for the protesters and be visible as weighing in, because this is, I think, very much how democracy works in this country. I don't think our voting is directly influencing policy. So we might not be out here changing minds. I'm sure the people that disagree with environmental activism aren't going to become environmentalists by driving by a protest. But I think it's really important for people to see that others are willing to take the time out of their day, raise a ruckus, make some noise. And I think that's really important, because how else will we know that this is such an important issue to people? And it really is.
I am so terrible on names, I already forgot your name.
Nelson, it's all
Nelson.
right. Coral.
And I'm Coral.
And Coral, why are you here? I'll keep my camera like where I need to be. So what brings you here? You guys are all the way from New England. That is amazing.
Yeah, we are here from Maine and from Massachusetts. And I'm here today because the Earth is probably the most important thing that I can think of to me throughout my life. As a child, I grew up playing in the woods in Maine, and I've always been imbued with a natural reverence for the world, and especially natural places. I'm also a climate change researcher, so I'm really interested in protests in this regard, as you might imagine. I'm interested in the way people are protesting, the way they're interacting, what they choose to express, and so I wanted to also be here to observe in that nature as well.
Well, now I'm intimidated. You're a climate change researcher. You probably know a lot. And do you believe, kind of going down that track, are we at kind of a critical impact point now? I mean, AOC says 12 years. A lot of people are saying some pretty strong things that we need to do, take drastic steps. Are you guys at we're at crisis mode, or do you see it a little different?
It was actually the International Panel of Climate Change Researchers from the UN that gave the prognosis that if we don't completely rebuild the global economy to be carbon neutral and sustainable in the next 12 years, then our species is bound for extinction. And if you look at the sort of momentum that's behind the global economy, the probability of us completely restructuring the automotive industry, the transportation industry, the agribusiness industries, and completely turning those into carbon neutral within 12 years is more or less laughable. So I would say, I don't mean to swoop this from you as a researcher. You should have more to say on that.
You want to jump in?
Well, yeah, I would say that we are at a critical point where we do need to take drastic action, but I would reframe it and not put it in the terms of a crisis point, because I think that people are more motivated by caring about something that they love and think is beautiful or important, rather than acting from a place of fear or a sense of emergency. I don't think that really motivates people in the long run, especially when it's framed in sort of this scientific and statistical nature that eliminates a lot of people from accessing information.
I think that's really a very thoughtful response, and you're understanding human psychology. And most people don't really like kicked in the butt and told, you will do this. So you're coming from a sense of urgency, but a little let's be real with our response. Would you say we just need to get the education out, or is that enough? Does the government need to get much more actively involved, in your opinion?
We have two sides of the conversation right now that we're seeing. One is reverence for the earth, and one is, well, we're all about to die. There's an extinction on the horizon, and we should really play on that. And I think what's key in understanding what's going on in this conversation, what I think is so powerful, is that their ultimate is ultimately instincts. What motivates you in terms of whether it's like, oh, it's love and reverence for the planet, and that's what motivates people. People got to be kind to the planet because, we're kind people. And the other, he's saying, other guy, he's saying, oh, well, we don't have much time. We don't have time for even like caring about this stuff. We have to take action. And I think that's indicative of both sides of this conversation. Now, I think he's maybe a little bit more consistent because right before this video, we were talking about why does she even have the need to be kind? And if someone like him comes along and says, we don't have time to be kind, we're gonna die. What does she say in response to that? Ultimately, where's her justification for that?
Well, I think that'll be the battle that will come down the road as we move and as society and cultures move this direction. You're going to have the nurturing side, and then you're going to have the harsher side that's going to be looking right into what they would suppose is death on the near horizon, and who's going to win out. And historically, you have 100 million people dying. These folks are all pretty far left. 100 million people dying in the 20th century under the name of Save the World for Utopia. And these are awesome people, and I really enjoyed them. And you can see them truly, like the Bible says, groping in the dark and with no light and no real moral compass except their own gut level instincts. And I think he was right when he said, no, we don't have time. And I think that he probably is describing the direction. I would say she's naive in human nature. And I think he's probably more in line with where human nature will take it. Time is short. We have enemies out there and we need to eliminate. That's what history says.
And so shortly in this video, we're going to be bringing in justifications from God's word as the sole basis for why we should be kind, why we should take care of the earth. We kind of mentioned it just you were about to bring this into the conversation in like Genesis, why we can trust God's promises and why Christians aren't in ultimate fear, but actually we have a moral basis for even caring about things like the environment in a God-centered way. And so let's just dive back into this video and we'll see you in a few.
Excellent.
I do think that the government needs to be more involved, but I think that it has to start with communities. So just like today, just being in a place, taking up space, and showing up, doing the work to connect with the ones around you, I think is really absolutely vital.
How do you feel? Agree or just?
I agree for the most part, but I think that most people don't have room in their lives for empathy and critical thinking about these things. A lot of people are worried about putting food on the dinner plate and, living paycheck to paycheck. So I think at this point in time, it may well be that it's a sense of self-preservation that is what's going to drive people to make climate-related decisions about their lives, because I think most people in this country aren't experiencing the true impacts. We had the folks who had their communities burned in fires in California, and we've got, serious weather events on the eastern seaboard that are really disrupting people's lives, and then it's becoming an immediate threat to existence. But unlike some of the signs that say save the earth, we were talking about this a minute ago, the earth is going to rebound. The earth has seen 5 mass extinctions. This will likely be the 6th, including human beings. So for us to understand climate change as an existential threat, that our children will be competing over clean water and dry land to live on and raise their families, I think if it's not framed in the most urgent terms, we're going to continue doing what we're doing and, enjoying ourselves and enjoying the privilege that comes with life in the developed world. Whereas if you live on a Pacific island or in Bangladesh, your safety is not guaranteed, and it's a much different issue for the people like that.
You guys are really doing a great job here. Do you have anything more you want to say on that one?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that. I think, sorry, it's a little noisy here. I think framing the earth as a victim, like when we say save the earth, is also maybe a bit problematic because, like Nelson said, the earth will survive in some form. It's humanity that will be wiped out by our own action. So I think maybe for other people, unlike me, I'm motivated by the earth, but maybe others are more motivated by humankind and human progress, and maybe framing it in those terms, like let's save humanity, would bring more people together.
You know, I was sharing with you guys that I kind of come from a Christian worldview. And from a Christian worldview, we believe in stewardship, that we have a stewardship responsibility. And when we see sewage going into rivers and things like that, definitely we need to care about other people. It's not consistent with love to be indifferent to where people are hurting and that sort of thing. Where I would be coming from is on the authority of the Bible. And I'll get your response on this, and because I know this is not your thing totally, but there's a promise in Genesis, and I don't know if you believe in the flood, the Genesis flood, but right in the Genesis flood, there's a promise afterward that God would preserve the planet, that we'd have seed time and harvest and summer and winter, and it wasn't going to go away. So for a Christian, we care about the planet, their stewardship, but we're not in panic mode that it's going to do a massive meltdown. So it's like we agree with stewardship, but we don't have quite the same sense of urgency that others would have. We have real confidence that God's in control. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I am not from a Christian background personally, but I am very curious what more religious folks think about these issues, because, you know, on the one hand, you know, you might think that God is in control and that the earth is being stewarded. On the other hand, you know, it could be that end times are written and the apocalypse is something that's natural, and if you are going to the right church, then you're just going to go to heaven and you shouldn't be concerned, which I think is a very scary idea to me as well, not being somebody identifying with Scripture. Yeah. So that's a very scary idea to me, that some people might not be concerned at all because it was all written and foretold in advance.
Well, yeah, and so, you know, in some ways I can see where you might be concerned with what I was saying, like that could create apathy. And there's a really strong statement by Jesus in the book of Revelation where he says, "You're neither hot or cold, you're lukewarm. I will spew you out or vomit you out." So lukewarm Christianity is not a good place for people to be indifferent, especially to be indifferent about people. And you know, I think we have to care enough to get out there and talk to folks, which is what I love doing, you know. And so I really do appreciate what you're saying, and we fight against apathy and indifference all the time. And I think we need to take a lot of very seriously some of the stuff that environmentalists are saying. I totally am on board. I think we have some common ground there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think fighting against apathy and indifference is something that we both share and have in common. And I wonder about different religious perspectives. I think that it all sort of, in my opinion, might come down to believing in something larger than ourselves and having that common belief and respect that other people are coming from a different perspective, but really have the same notion in their worldview, in their hearts. Perhaps that can help us to understand these different sides and conflicting views that are.
I think I 100% agree, and I think probing these issues and asking these questions is really, really healthy. What you guys are asking, and you're framing some stuff in a very thoughtful way, both you guys, and I really totally respect that a lot. It's really cool. Kind of, you know, worldviews in conflict. I would be curious, kind of, could you define what your worldview is? I know not everybody can. Sometimes you ask people that question and they're like, huh, what are we talking about? And it's okay to not have spent a ton of time thinking about it, but you guys look like pretty thoughtful folks. What do you think? Can you define your worldview? And you were talking about there's something bigger than yourselves, and you were acting like, that's an important thing.
Yeah, I do think that it's important to believe in something beyond yourself. I think that it's also very important to put in a lot of self-love into who you are, and maybe this happens in stages where you build up your own self-love.
Sorry.
That's okay. Initially, and then you're able to give to something that's beyond yourself. Worldview, I guess I'm very, very curious about everything in the world. So I would say that that's at the corner of my identity. I also have a sense of wonder for a lot of different things. So curiosity, wonder, and listening. I think it's very important to listen.
You guys are awesome. Do you feel, just kind of as you pondered these big issues, do you believe in God? What do you think? Have you wrestled with that very much?
It has brought me to that question a number of times, trying to think about our temporary existence here. I wouldn't say that I identify with the idea of God as it's presented by most mainstream religions. However, I think that the most beautiful and sacred things that are held by people everywhere have a lot of common ground with that same idea of God, something that transcends our own impermanence, something that has objective moral value. Those ideas do resonate with me at the end of the day. I think I would probably be a nihilist if I didn't believe that. And I think partly that the idea of a common existential threat is, when I try and look at the bright side on my less, frustrating days thinking about this stuff, I hope that a common threat to our humanity is exactly what brings people together on a common level of understanding. And it doesn't need to be religious or under the notion of God, but that there is something good that is of and part of humanity, that we can disassociate ourselves with the different divisions that we have, whether it's a tribal identity, a family identity, a national or religious identity. I think flags are extremely destructive when we talk about these things, because how are we supposed to make global environmental policy when the United States is worried about Russia's national interest and Russia's worried about our national? But all right, I think the idea of understanding us as a common humanity is the only way that we're going to surmount any of these problems. But if we're too worried about distrusting each other because we belong to different groups, we're just going to stay fighting each other until there's nothing left to fight for. So,
hang on. Kind of inhaled something.
Quite all right.
Do you have anything you want to say? Thoughts on God?
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what Nelson said. I think that in my belief, we create our own version of gods individually. And God, I would define as what I've sort of touched on earlier, is something larger than ourselves. And so in that sense, yes, I do believe in God. I don't believe in God as defined by other people, but by my own definition, absolutely.
Okay. And and Sharon, from my viewpoint as well, I believe everybody out here is stamped with the image of God, which means everybody out here is precious. And that we have in common. Now, here's where it gets a little salty. I'm coming kind of from like a person who's really explored this issue a lot and coming out of a real kind of a agnostic background and testing the water, with the authority of the Word. Is the Bible true? And I hack away. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, I've kind of explored that, but I can really share and identify that everybody out here is pretty precious. And my basis for that is that they're in the image of God.
So you brought in the image of God. The ultimate basis for why people are precious is the word you used. And I like that word because precious is something that's, it's not defined in secular humanist philosophy. Nothing's beautiful in a humanist worldview apart from God. Beauty is arbitrary. That's where you see artists without God saying, doing these gory, disgusting pieces and saying, look, it's art. Mm-hmm. And that's not art. When anything can be art, and it becomes arbitrary, but we have art, we have preciousness, we have beauty with a creator. And so why did you bring the image of God into this conversation at this point?
This is Worldviews in Conflict, and so now I'm interjecting the Christian worldview, which I told them I would before we ever did the interview. So now I'm trying to interject the basis for Christian caring, love, compassion, that we bear the image of God. And I'm trying to begin to ease them into my worldview, which I have a basis for that. Mm-hmm. They're going to identify with that image of God language because they are in the image of God. But they'll have no ground for it, and they're going to try to diffuse it away from that, saying whether you frame it religiously or any other way, it's all okay, because they're not going to want to go down the track of truth, that this is truth. They're going to be pushing back there, but they're going to identify with aspects of truth that I'm sharing with them because they like the feel of it, but they have no basis for it.
Their conscience is resonating with something that's deep within themselves.
Right.
And so you have him say, that's actually the basis for any moral movement, is that we love our neighbor. Well, where do you get that from without God? And that's where I like to lead the conversation, and I think that's a loving response, actually, not just a flippant response that just, gotcha, but it's actually, hey, what you're doing is actually evidencing what I'm saying right now. And you just said, nothing can get done unless we love others. And again, I have to say, who says love others? So what?
And I think as we move down the track here, watch body language. And watch the pushback. Romans 1 talks about we hold back truth, we repress truth because we're living in darkness. We want to stay there. And as we're sharing the gospel, we're sharing light. But there's that part of man, Genesis 3, pushing away from God. We're uncomfortable because of our sin. And so now we're planting seed in the garden of their lives. We're not reaping, but we're planting seed. And as these people go away, they're going to be thinking about these thoughts. And watch, though, it's going to get a little more dicey as we move down the trail and move towards the gospel. And watch their faces, watch their body language.
Right, and we're bringing in conviction. We're bringing in the harsh news that if he's good, then we're not. And there's a way out.
And by the way, don't eat nuts before you do an interview. I start hacking around. Not a good idea. I was kind of like, oh man. So that kind of messed me up a little bit. But they are very gracious towards me, as I truly was kind of hacking around.
Anyway, let's continue with this video, and we'll see you in just a bit.
Okay. And I think that's the most solid foundation that a person could possibly have. What do you feel about my view?
I think that's the only thing, that's the only real basis, whether you frame it in religious terms or not, that's the only basis from which we can move forward as a society to confront issues like this. Because if you're not worried about the life of your brother, sister, neighbor, or the person on the other side of the world, then there's really no incentive to fight climate change at all.
Okay.
I think that's exactly the sort of foundation that everybody needs to adopt. Like I said, whether it's in religious terms or not, but the value of human life as being transcendent.
I'd love to kind of get right to the heart of Christianity and just kind of get your thoughts on it. And one thing, and Christianity is challenging, and I get it. You know, it's like it's claiming to be truth. And in our world of diversity, that's like, oh man. But the common, Christians are commanded to love people. They're in the image of God, but we do proclaim truth, the idea that there is truth. And there is a biblical view of man that I was wanting to share with you guys, if that's okay. And you may have already heard it, but I'll share it with you. And that is that we're created in the image of God, but fallen. That's the Genesis 3. We're not what we're created to be. That we have a big problem, and that is God is holy and we're sinful. And that's where the message of Jesus comes in. And as we explore sinful, what does that mean, sinful? It means that we have a conscience. And that conscience is universal. Everybody has a conscience no matter where you are. You have a sense of oughtness. This is right and this is wrong. What do you think about the notion of a conscience, that things are right and things are wrong? And we all carry that. We may not fundamentally agree on every aspect of it, but we all have a conscience. Do you think we do?
I think we do. I wouldn't, yeah.
I think that we do all have a conscience, but I do think that it's shaped a lot by context. So I studied anthropology, and people growing up in different places or with different social influences have different ideas of what is right and wrong. And I don't think that I would make a statement on those people's beliefs on what is right or wrong. I think you're right that everyone does have some sort of instinctual conscience, but those right and wrong would not be clear-cut in my view.
Here's something for you guys to explore, and you may have never thought about this, but it's the uniqueness of Christianity in terms of all the world's religions. And you'll have to test this yourself, but in all the world's religions, man is trying to fix himself, keep rules, obey commandments in order to earn merit for God to accept you into heaven. Where the Christian message is, we can't do it. We're utter failures. That's where Christ comes in, who paid the price for you. And God is perfectly holy. Man is sinful. But the gap is bridged by Jesus, who fulfills Old Testament prophecy, that sort of thing. But the uniqueness of the Christian message is we can't get there by good works. We get there by faith and trust in what He did, believing in something beyond yourself. And it's like C.S. Lewis said, there's Christianity in everything else. Everything else is trying to be good, and we utterly fail. Christianity is saying you won't make it on that basis. You got to make it on the merit of Jesus only. That's a very unique message. What do you guys think about it? You probably heard that before, maybe not. I don't know. I'll get your thoughts.
Yeah, I don't agree with it. Okay. Yeah, I think that the idea of faith is very dangerous. To place your faith in something outside of you, and to place your faith in a person whose words you're not even able to access by your own self. You're trying to access salvation through someone else as it is related to you through somebody's words who have never met that person. I don't think that's a healthy way to approach the matter. I think that if humans have flaws, which we undoubtedly do, those are flaws that are endowed to every creature as a part of being from and of nature. So the idea of putting faith in something that you have to go through a third party to access truth is a very dangerous thing.
Okay. You know, and my parents would 100% agree with you. They were appalled with me when I became a Christian. My dad was a psychologist and said, "Oh, we are going to watch you carefully. We think you've lost it." What do you think about any of that?
I don't think that faith is inherently dangerous, but I do think that putting faith in an organized religion can be dangerous. I think it's a personal choice. I think if it makes you happy, it brings fulfillment, it brings you to that place where it's beyond yourself, then that's not my place to judge. I personally wouldn't do it, but again, I don't proceed to think that I should judge what is right or wrong. If it's being directed towards others in a way that is either actively trying to change their minds or even in a more extreme way, then absolutely I have a problem with that.
What do you guys think about the notion that man is created in God's image but fallen, sinful, that the image of God has been blurred, so as we, and we're headed towards death and ultimately judgment according to Christianity, and unless we embrace the gospel, we're lost and headed for eternal destruction. That's a pretty strong message, but it is what the Christian message is, and it's pretty strong, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that framing ourselves as sinful doesn't set you up for accessing the true potential of who you are. I think that we aren't sinful. I think we're very flawed, but we're glorious people.
Nelson, you probably didn't like that message too well either, right?
Not so much.
And you've expressed yourself very well. I will share one last thing with you guys, and you're probably like, oh man, when's this guy going to be done? I have a master's in religion. That doesn't mean I know everything. I don't. There's so much out there. But I will share this with you. A lot of people don't realize this, but it's not argued among scholars, the PhD level, that we have accurate copies of the Old and New Testament, because we have so many, and the copies are so close to the originals that even atheistic scholars will tell you, yes, we have accurate copies. We don't agree with it. They would disagree with the message of it, but both old and new are considered some of the most credible things out there. And in the PhD realm, there's a guy named Gary Habermas who's really one of the best guys to read on this. Even with the guys at the PhD level, they admit and agree that Jesus lived, that he died, that he was crucified, that he was buried, and they understand that the apostles were eyewitnesses and claim to see the resurrection. Now, if you're an atheist, you're not going to buy it, but they recognize that things happened back then, and these guys were forever changed, and some of the witnesses were hostile to Christianity. So even in that realm, there's a lot more solid fundamental. I think the bottom line that I would encourage people is check out the foundation, because the message is strong and it hits us in the gut really, really hard. And it's very, very difficult to choke down. I was raised, and I'm just like you guys, very, very tolerant. That's where it's at. And to come along and say Jesus is the Son of God and he fulfilled scriptures, that's a little hard to deal with, isn't it? I mean, you guys are going, oh man. But I would encourage anybody to just check that out. And Gary Habermas is online, and he's an excellent source. He's a PhD. He got his PhD actually at University of Michigan in the philosophy department. Sorry. But anyhow, hey, I have kept you guys too long. Thanks for talking to me. I hope it hasn't been too painful.
No, it hasn't. Thanks for sharing your views.
Absolutely.
I always appreciate these exchanges.
Great conversation. You guys are awesome. All right, I'll let you go. Get back and start yelling. All right, take care.
Good talking to you.
Good talking to you.
So that was the end of the video. Wow, what an amazing conversation. I was really happy to listen to it and to be a part of that and actually watch it from a distance. We don't know where they are right now, and we do have to trust God that he's setting up these appointments. And I think it's absolutely amazing that this conversation got to take place, and the gospel was heard. You're talking about meaningful foundations, which they don't have. And they are again expressing that in that they are image bearers of God, but they struggle. They struggle the whole way through, and you're giving them truth and saying it's basically arguing for itself. You don't have to argue for this. Look into this. Search. Get answers. There are answers. I know you have questions. Continue the search, and you're just a small blip in their story. Yeah.
Well, I would say, when we're sharing the gospel with people, you can see the pullback and the resistance, and that is part of the proclamation of the gospel, and it's tough. And I understand where they're coming from. I was totally there, so I think identifying with that, but getting it out there, and then letting them chew on it, and then encouraging them to explore. We're gardeners, like I think I said a little bit earlier. We're sowing a lot of seed here. We're going to let the Holy Spirit work in their lives. It's God's providence at work. We're one little part of their journey, and we're just going to encourage them. And hopefully they're going to wrestle with these things. So they're not at that place of reaping, ready to commit to Christ. But I think this could be you hope this can be a step in the right way. And the pushback is going to come, and the resistance is going to come, and I think you have to be very prayerfully prepared to engage people. And really, it takes supernatural power for us to get up there and share. And don't eat nuts before you talk. They were very gracious to me. I was choking and gagging and spitting around. You didn't see half of that. So that's where my voice was messed up. So these are, I really enjoyed these people. These were really cool people.
And on that note, we didn't record this, But right before we went into this protest, we prayed.
Sure.
We just said, God, give us the words, because we don't. If we go out in our own strength, we're going to be bumbling around and not knowing what to say. And well, we just need to trust Him entirely as we go out. We pray and then we move. And I think that's a biblical principle that you see consistently, especially through the book of Acts, as the church goes out and spreads the gospel.
And I really do believe you have to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Mm-hmm. And we went into this thing recognizing, hey, we're going to be surrounded by a lot of very activist, radical kind of people. Mm-hmm. And we thought about, this could go south pretty fast. I mean, these guys were out there, and we just had to give that up. And in fact, we kind of said, hey, if it does go south, it'll be great video. We'll have a lot of fun with it.
Right.
And, and we didn't know, but, we were protected here. And I think we got some great footage, and it showed the hearts of people. And hopefully, some of the gospel that we shared will resonate.
And if you yourself aren't a believer and are watching our videos, I just want to encourage you for yourself to actually look into the foundations of what you believe and why you believe it. And I would plead with you that you would come out of your contradictions and seek Christ and turn to Him and trust in Him and for salvation. And through that, He gives you a new life and new heart. And if you have any doubts, feel free to reach out. Our email is worldviewsinconflict@gmail.com. And on this video, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing. It means a lot in this early stages of this ministry. We have a lot of local support, and this is mainly for local believers in our area as an educational tool to get out there. But if you aren't in our local area, that's great. Please consider subscribing. It does show support for what we are doing. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Hey, by the way, we're going to develop a web address for follow-up, and be in prayer for us. There's a lot of work to be done. And Luke works full-time. I work part-time. We need a lot of prayer.
Absolutely. Anyway, see you in the next video.